What's up guys, it's your favorite Kiwi coach. Welcome to video number 6 of this FlightScope video setup tutorial series. In this video, we're going to be talking about the data points of trajectory, giving you guys the basic definitions, as well as giving you some parameters and kind of how you can use this when you're out practicing to make your practice just that much better. But without further ado, let's go do this thing. So let's start out with the data point of vertical launch. What is that? Well, really it's called launch angle. So if you guys have used SkyTrack or TrackMan before, you probably heard launch angle. Well, that is what vertical launch is. Now, vertical launch or launch angle is really kind of the initial angle or the initial launch of the golf ball. So let's say if you hit the golf ball, which is right here, this is the point where you hit the golf ball. Let's say right around here, they start to measure vertical launch. Whatever angle that the golf ball is kind of launching on, relative to the ground, that will be your vertical launch. In this particular case, this player was hitting a 5-iron who's launching at 11.7 degrees. Now, that's actually kind of low for a 5-iron. Again, it's really dependent on the player's club head speed, what shot, what trajectory you're trying to hit. Obviously, all that kind of comes into play, but just realize that's the basic definition of vertical launch. There are some parameters that you would want to follow. We'll go over a few of them a little bit later on in this video, but we should have already gone over some of these if you're tracking vertical launch. Okay, moving on to dynamic loft. So dynamic loft is how much loft you're presenting at the moment of impact. To give you an example here, this player's dynamic loft was 16.9 degrees. Now, what you're going to have to find out is, okay, how much loft does a 5-iron typically have? Now, I actually don't know this right now. I'd have to look it up, and I usually do look it up in lessons. But let's say that a typical 5-iron has about 23 degrees of loft. So if he has 16.9 degrees of dynamic loft, that means that he took off loft or had a little bit of handle first at the moment of impact. So again, you're probably thinking, okay, Kiwi coach, what dynamic loft should I have for which club? Again, it's really dependent on what trajectory of shot that you want, also kind of what club head speed that you have. Really, there's all these little factors that kind of go into this, and hopefully in the lesson we've already kind of gone over a few ranges of dynamic loft for different clubs for you. But if we haven't, we're definitely going to give you a few little parameters here a little bit later on the video. But for now, that's dynamic loft. Just realize it's how much loft you're presenting at the moment of impact. Okay, moving on to spin loft. Spin loft is incredibly important when you're trying to track your distance control as well as your trajectory. So spin loft is directly translated into back spin. So if I have a really high spin loft degree, let's say 45 degrees, I'm going to have a lot of backspin, right? And for certain shots, that's a good thing. For other shots, that might be a bad thing, right? If I have little to no spin loft degree, let's say like 8 degrees, 7 degrees, I'm going to have very minimal backspin. Again, that's good for maybe some shots, bad for some other shots. To give you a quick little example, let's say I'm hitting a wedge into a green, and let's say the green is very, very firm, and the green is almost the pin is kind of on a little plateau, and you need to stop the golf ball quickly. Well, that would probably be a situation where you'd want to have close to about a 45 degree spin loft to get as much backspin as you possibly could, so you could stop the golf ball very quickly. Another situation, let's take that same wedge, however the greens are very soft and wet. If you had a lot of backspin, like 45 degrees spin loft, you actually might spin the golf ball off of the plateau all the way down the hill, so then you probably want to have a little bit less spin loft degree, right? So again, it really depends on kind of what shot you're trying to hit is what spin loft you're going to want to get. Let's move on to the next data point, which is vertical descent. So vertical descent is, again, another important thing when we're talking about, do we want to stop the golf ball or do we want the golf ball to roll out more? So let's give you some examples here. So this player has 41.3 degrees of vertical descent, and this is with a 5-iron. So that means that when the golf ball reaches its peak height or the highest point in the swing arc, whatever angle that it comes down on relative to the ground, that's going to be his vertical descent. In this particular case, is 41.3 degrees. So you're probably thinking, is this good or bad, Kiwi coach? Well, typically with the 5-iron, because it's kind of closer to your lower iron clubs, right, which tend to be a little bit lower for most people, you actually kind of want to have a vertical descent that's typically going to be on the steeper side. And 41.3 degrees is not incredibly steep. I think 45, 46 degrees would be coming in at a pretty steep angle, and you're going to stop the golf ball quite quickly most of the time with that. But 41.3 is definitely not flat by any means. I would say 35 degrees, 32 degrees, even 30 degrees I've seen is very, very flat when it comes to vertical descent angle. Again, just like with any of these data points, vertical descent angle, what is best for you depends on what club you're trying to hit and then what shot you're trying to hit. If you're trying to hit a driver and you want to get optimal roll, you probably want a descent angle that's closer to 35 degrees so it comes in a little flatter with a little bit more roll. Again, if you're hitting that wedge or you're hitting an iron and you really want it to stop quickly because it's firm greens, you're probably going to want to have a steeper descent angle closer to 45. Okay, so moving on to peak height. So peak height, I kind of just foreshadowed in the last data point, but it's pretty much the peak height or the highest point of the golf ball's flight. So again, just like with descent angle, your peak height and how high it is really dependent on what you're trying to do with the shot. Are you trying to hit the golf ball really, really high to stop it quickly, or are you trying to hit it really, really low to keep it out of the wind? Again, peak height is going to change for what club you're hitting as well as what shot you're going to hit. Very, very crucial here. All right, last but not least, spin rate, which I'm sure all of you guys kind of know. Spin rate, again, is just how much backspin the golf ball has. They measure it in revolutions per minute, I think. And really, spin rate is dependent, again, on kind of how much backspin you want to have or how little backspin you want to have. Let me kind of give you an example. Let's say if we're swinging really, really slow, let's say we swing about 37 meters per second with our driver. Let's also say that we have about 10 degrees of dynamic loft. We're launching the ball maybe at 8 degrees, and our spin loft is going to be, let's say, maybe like 8 degrees, which means our spin rate is going to be maybe like 1500 RPMs. The issue with that is, because I swing so slow, and I have that small of a launch angle and that's minimal of spin, the ball is almost going to kind of just fall out of the air, and I'm not going to get my optimal distance. So with a player that had 37 meters per second club head speed with driver, let's say that they probably want to have a dynamic loft closer to like 18, 19 degrees, having a vertical launch maybe closer to 14 degrees, spin loft maybe closer to about 10 to 11, 12 degrees, and then you're going to want to see a spin rate maybe closer to 1900 to 2200 RPMs, and that would actually produce probably the most optimal shot for that player. So again, it's all about your club head speed, what shot you're trying to hit. It can really be any type of number, and I'm hoping you guys can get that from this video, that it's not just this is the best, this is the best. It really depends on what you're trying to do, and hopefully we have done that in lessons. So to wrap this video up, I hope you guys enjoyed on kind of how to control your trajectory. I think the main thing that you guys should focus on when you're trying to change these numbers is I would probably first start with dynamic loft. I feel like that's the easiest one to kind of fix. So if you're hitting the golf ball too low for your preference, try to add on dynamic loft. You can do that by striking the golf ball a little higher in the face, maybe coming through and feeling like you're hitting a little bit more of a bunker shot or trying to add loft through the shot. If you're hitting the ball too high, obviously trying to take off loft, maybe a little bit more handle first ideas. Those could be some ideas on how to fix first. Once you fix your dynamic loft, I'd like you to kind of start checking these other data points and kind of see how these change and then see if it's producing the shots that you want. But again, hopefully in lessons we've kind of gone over this in a little bit more detail. So without further ado, I'm going to end this video off. We're going to go on to the next video, which is going to be talking about kind of some miscellaneous data points that we haven't quite covered yet, which these are more advanced. So just realize it's going to be maybe for more of the advanced players, these new data points we're talking about. But yeah, I'll see you guys in that video.